Hello and a very warm welcome to the Andrew Eborn Show. An extraordinary week we have had in magic when we've lost two of our greatest show people. Gerry Cottle, the famous circus owner and creator, sadly passed away this week. And also Siegfried from Siegfried and Roy, the legendary Las Vegas magician. Well, I'm delighted to be joined by somebody who worked very closely with Siegfried and Roy for several years. It's Donna King. Thank you for joining me, Donna.
Hi, thank you. It's nice to be here. Yeah, a bit of a shame, isn't it? He's gone on to magic heaven, I guess, with his love of his life and his beautiful white tigers. And
it was sensational, wasn't it? And Roy only passed. It was just a year ago, wasn't it?
I know, and I think it was COVID related. I had just read recently, I wasn't quite sure what it was, but he was poorly for a while anyway, Roy, wasn't he? Ever since the accident where the tiger took him off stage, basically. He was trying to protect him. She was trying to protect Roy, and and he fell. They had a little thing on stage, and Roy fell, and she took him by the back of the neck and took him off stage, like you would if you were a mama tiger trying to protect you.
And we'll come on to that, because basically, let's set the context. So you yourself first got involved in the 90s, didn't you? You were introduced by your then husband. Talk to me about that.
Okay, right. Well, I guess it was 1990, I suppose it happened, that I was married to a set designer called John Napier. And
famous set designer, absolutely.
He is quite a fabulous set designer. He's an amazing guy, wonderful guy. And so we were living I'd moved to London. I'd moved over from New York. I'd met John in New York on Broadway. And, so we were living in Highbury at the time, and John got this call, and he was asked to do so many things back then. I mean, we had Mick Jagger knocking on our door and Tom Stoppard coming over. It was a really...
He never stops knocking, does he, that Mick Jagger? He's round all the time.
Oh, he's everywhere, isn't he? But it was an amazing time, and just, it was really a heady time. And it was just, I was a bit like, wow. But one of the calls that came through was from the Siegfried and Roy production. And they asked John if he wanted to do the new show for the new hotel, because they were moving them to the Mirage at that time. So John Napier had also been working with John Caird on Les Miserables. And so I think for some reason, the pair of them got swooped up into doing this, and they said, yes, let's go, let's do it. So all of a sudden we were flying to Las Vegas and living there for 6 months, I guess, to put the show together, and in this crazy orange shag carpeted house on a golf course.
What extraordinary was, I mean, talk to me about, because coming to Vegas, they basically revolutionized the way magic was performed, didn't they? But everything in Las Vegas is about excess. Talk to me about that orange mansion.
Well, everything was a spectacle, you're right. And I think that's why they were attracted to John's work, because he did very beautiful magical spectacle sets for things like Cats and Les Miserables and Starlight Express and lots of RSC productions and things. So he was always kind of breaking the fourth wall and just putting you into another whole headspace, and really letting your imagination take over. He was wonderful at that. So I'm sure that's why they wanted him for that job. And they were similar-minded people. I mean, they were very gracious and very lovely, really. I mean, just terrific and very welcoming and hospitable, and just nice energy about the pair of them, really, because we didn't know what it's going to be like when we got there, but it was all very much laid out and set up. And we were living in a guy called Engelbert Humperdinck's house.
Yes, we love Engelbert Humperdinck.
When I think back about that time, I kind of just remember this house because it was literally like orange shag carpet everywhere.
Everything was orange everywhere, wasn't it? And,
everything was orange everywhere. Everything was orange everywhere.
That was the inspiration for the president a little bit later, wasn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, it kind of reminded you of all of that. I mean, gold statues and telephone by the toilet, and custom made everything, but in shades of orange. It was all very, very orange.
So that first meeting then with Siegfried and Roy, what did they say?
Well, they were great. I mean, they come to rehearsals a lot. I was working with the choreographer at the time, so we had a company of, I think we had like 40 showgirls. We had 12 trolls. We had, plus all the animals. So I think it was quite a large cast. We had about 60 people, I think. So we were working in this big warehouse in the middle of the desert, and Anthony Van Laast and I made up the steps basically, and had a whale of a time doing it. Really, it was a lot of fun, and they would kind of saunter in from time to time and say yes to everything we did basically.
Well, that
We had a
makes it so much
terrific
easier,
company.
doesn't it? When you have clients who just say yes, that's great, isn't it?
I know, those were the days, right? Everybody's just like, yeah, it's fantastic. Keep going, keep going.
And sometimes you get magicians where they try to dance. You do the dancing cane, which is wonderful, and it's a wonderful magic illusion. But it's wonderful if you, as a performer, can dance. How were they learning the steps and the choreography that you gave them?
Well, no, wait, let me go back a little bit, because they weren't actually dancing with the company, but I mean, it was their show, so they had to like what we were doing on everyone, and they were a very in-house group. Their PA was a lovely lady called Lynette, very severe hair and just very, very Vegas. And she was in the show as well. So she did the snake dance.
Right.
So I'll never forget as long as I lived, holding this boa constrictor in my hands and trying to figure out what movements you would do if you had a boa constrictor in your hands. So yeah, they were just really, really nice to work with. And we rehearsed for a long time, got into the theater. And that was the thing, because they were used to the other old theater in Las Vegas. And they moved to the Mirage, which was just built. So there's a lot of teething pains, going on there. And so I just remember this one time when I walked into the theater. I don't think anybody was there, but there was a Black Panther, and they're getting the cats used to the new space. And it takes a minute or two, because cats aren't quite sure about these new things sometimes. And I walked in there, and it was just Roy on the stage, and the Black Panther was on a pedestal, and the Black Panther was doing this to him. And he was like this, and he was doing it back to him. And he was doing this, back to him. And I was just like, I kind of like probably had my Coke in my hand going, oh, about dropped it. I was just like, what is gonna happen? But Roy was the cool guy with the magic and with the animals, and Siegfried was the amazing magician. The story about how they met, don't you, on the ship?
Share it, absolutely.
Well, I loved it when they told us the story, which I thought was wonderful. So Siegfried was a magician, and he had learned from a guy called, I wrote this name down, I bet you might know who he was. I think he was a magician in Germany during the death camp times, so there was a lot to try to bring magic to at that time, I think. And they were both born just as the war was going on. And so I'm sure it was quite hairy times, to say the least. But so Siegfried was just really on the boat, and he was a magician, and he had gone on to work there to pull a rabbit out of a hat type thing. And Roy's mother's boyfriend had owned the Berlin Zoo. So he was very au fait with the exotic animals since he was about 10 years old or so. So Roy actually brought a cheetah on board the ship as a little bit of a secret.
As you do, you're stowaway luggage, absolutely.
Yeah, like you do.
Like you do.
I know. And I think Roy was
a cheetah. It's got to be good.
Yeah, exactly. Just down under the thing there's a cheetah. And I think Roy was a waiter or a busboy, or he was just working somehow as a young guy on the ship. So Siegfried was always very grand, very grand, darling. And so he would say, Roy said to him, so Siegfried said to Roy, what do you think of my act? And Roy said, I think it's really boring. He said, pulling a rabbit out of a hat, it's really boring. He said, how about a cheetah? So that's it began, basically. So they started, I think they got kicked off that ship for having the cheetah on it. And then they got picked up by somebody who owned a theater, and got them into the European cabaret circuit, I think, at the time. And, so thus it began, and it went on and on. But the stories they told, my favorite story, can I just tell you my favorite story? Okay, so they were at the hotel, they were doing the show. And I had worked Vegas before, by the way. I had started my career as a showgirl there back in the day. But so it was a little bit familiar to me how those shows were. So they were on stage. There's 3 pillars to the side of the stage where there were 3 white tigers. Well, so the show's going on, they're doing this and that, they're like slicing the lady in half and all the kind of stuff they do, making the elephant disappear. And all of a sudden, the tigers decide that they're a little bit randy. And so there were, there's 3 tigers up there, and 2 of them started to copulate, started to be romantic with one another. What can you do? There's not a lot you can do. You don't want to get in the way of that, do you? He said the audience went berserk. Can you imagine? Back in the day, they'd have been smoking and drinking and carrying on. All of a sudden, these 2 white tigers just getting it on right in front of them. And Siegfried said there was nothing they could do, absolutely nothing. The show stopped. So he just took his jacket off. He just thought, I'll take my jacket off and put it across him to give them some privacy. So the show went on, I guess, and they didn't probably get to do the whole act that night.
Tigers or Siegfried and Roy?
I don't know. I don't know. Good question.
That's fantastic. Well, we talk about that, and they did revolutionize the way that magic's performed. And when I talk about magic and dances, movement is so key when you're doing those big illusions. So when you're talking about choreography, the way that they project and tell a story to the audience in the same way as David Copperfield does, and so on and so forth, is just so magical in itself, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think it was wonderful the way that John Caird and John Napier devised the show, because they created kind of a fairy tale with a good witch and a bad, there's a good and an evil. And so we sort of created some kind of an idea for the story to kind of hang on, so that we could use all these effects and things, all these ideas that Johnny Napes was coming up with, which was like, he created this dragon. It must have been 40 feet high, right, and it had these magnificent kind of arms to it. And it would sort of come out like this, and it would just go, and as like 40 Amazonian showgirls came marching forward underneath his legs, then it would pick up Siegfried and blow fire at it, and pick up Roy and blow fire at it. And it was incredible. It really was. And the music was fantastic, because guess who did the music? Michael Jackson. Who knew?
It was incredible. And Michael himself was a real magic fan. He loved his magic. So every time he would come to the UK, he would pop along to Hamley's, our little local toy store, as you know, and he would go and look around the magic department, and he would just adore it.
Oh, yes, I can imagine so. And I think what happened was that there was a theme song that was written for the show, and it really wasn't quite right for what we were doing. So John Napier had been designing a costume for Michael Jackson for a show at Disneyland called Captain EO, which was like a 12-minute kind of 3D show that was on at Disneyland. Yeah. And so he asked him, he had an occasion to ask him, he said, Michael, would you, Siegfried and Roy, we're working on that. We got this song. What would you help us out? And John played the existing song from Michael, and he said he literally did a somersault and laughed because he thought it was so bad. So he said yes. So he wrote this really cool song for the finale, and of course we lifted the percussion out of the middle of it to use for the part where the girls come out of the dragon and all this sort of thing. But it really gave it some cojones, It really kind of, and he was such a superstar at that time, as well. Yeah,
and it is. I mean, they epitomized Vegas in their heyday. I mean, you touched earlier about the tragic accident, and there are all sorts of rumors about what happened, because the adoration actually that Roy had, particularly with the big cats. As you say, they sort of talked me through that accident, because there have been so many different reports, and the truth of it is that actually I think the tiger was trying to protect him, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they had a moment on stage where they had I think that's what he would do. They would bat each other, and he was kind of trying to keep them in line. And, Roy was the father of the tribe. He took the tigers on from cubs, and sort of he was like the father figure to these wild tigers, which is quite a feat in itself. And from what I heard, Roy slipped. He slipped on the stage and ended up falling down. And the tiger was just a bit freaked out, didn't know what to do. And she was caring for him. So she dragged him off stage, basically, is what happened, sadly. But, Roy was just so he was always smiling, and he was just, he had him climbing all over him, and they'd be walking through the house. And I think they even slept in the bedroom with them, along with, they were in a kind of a glass cage, this jungle paradise place that they had at the Mirage Hotel, which they would live in that as well. But yeah, so it was all the tigers, white tigers, panthers, the snake, there was an elephant. Oh my gosh, that was a slip up on opening night. Yeah, the big new opening, big hotel. I mean, I think this show made 30 million the first year or something crazy. It was a big success. Steve Wynn, who owned the Mirage Hotel, gave us $1,000, like you do in Vegas. Say, hey, go have fun, go gamble, go play. And so we're sitting at the table gambling, and I'm kind of feeling kind of cool, looking my little showgirl dress and everything. And all of a sudden somebody comes out and says, the elephant stuck, the elephant stuck. Come back in quickly, quickly. And we're like, what? So put the cards down, run back into the theater. And sure enough, the stage, the trick that is supposed to hide the elephant, the elevator was kind of stuck at an angle. So it was a little bit awkward. And the elevator, Siegfried was effing and blinding, and the elephant was stuck. And we're like, I guess we're finished with that hand. Guess we better come and see some things now. But every day was like that. Every day was just sort of wacky.
Every day, I mean, Vegas, it is all about excess, and every day has to be wacky, doesn't it? I mean, Vegas, how do you think they would like to be remembered, Siegfried and Roy?
I think they would like to be remembered bringing a smile to people's faces and kind of making them drop their jaws and be awestruck about, how did they do that? How did they do that? Be dazzled. Everything in Vegas is about being dazzled. So I think that they would probably like to be remembered like that. And also being very kind, because they invited us to their house, and, they were very generous and very hospitable. And they were like the hosts, they were the grand hosts, and they wanted to present this big show. I think I was just reading a bit more about them today, and, they kind of both came from nothing. So sometimes, when that happens, people stay very grand for a long time.
And it's an extraordinary family, because the news actually broke through Siegfried's sister, who's in Bavaria, and she's a nun.
Is she really?
Yes. So she basically broke the news just this week, and she's a nun. So you talk about this sort of humble backgrounds, and sometimes that's what's so grounding, isn't it? Because you come from nothing, and then you get all the world is your stage, and you have that sort of excess and want to bring that sort of happiness. In the same way as we talked about Gerry Cottle at the beginning, another fantastic showman who we lost only yesterday actually, goes out. And again, bringing that idea of theatre and the big shows to the general public is a blessing, isn't it?
It's interesting when you think about it like that. I can definitely see that. And I think what Siegfried's impetus was also that his father was quite a strict Bavarian man, and he didn't get his attention much. So, he would show him a magic trick with a coin and a glass of water or something, and he would get approval, and he would get, you're right. I've heard about this story a lot. I mean, my father's a performer. He's a Texan guitarist.
Right.
And my favorite story about my daddy is down in Texas, and they didn't have a whole lot, but he had a little red wagon, and he would pull his little sister in this little red wagon and go knocking on old ladies' doors and do a magic show for a quarter, And so thus it begins. So he's still doing his thing, and it's something that works, I guess, isn't it? It's something that cuts through the doldrum.
It tends to be, and you often find a lot of people in the magic world and the performing world, they normally have quite shy characters behind the scenes, don't they? Mm-hmm. It's the performance which gives them that cloak, if you like, that cloak to get out there and be a bit more outgoing, if you like. But behind the scenes, they're normally quite shy, a lot of people, aren't they? What was Siegfried and Roy like?
I didn't really... I suppose I didn't know them so deeply well. So they were always probably a little bit on, because I mostly saw them around the theater while we were putting the show together, But they seemed, they were very hospitable. They were very willing to tell tales and, be a bit of a raconteur about these things that happened in their lives. And I think they were really happy. I think they really were enjoying what they did. They were so excited to have a new theater, and so excited to have these wonderful, talented people, to help them put this show on. And I think they were just really delighted that, everything had kind of come up a notch, I suppose, for them, because instead of just kind of being a Vegas-y show, they had these sort of Broadway, West End kind of, aficionados who were like creating this wonderful theater all around the world, you know, with Les Mis and that sort of thing, to kind of up the game for them a little bit. And I think they really enjoyed that. I think they listened to them.
You're absolutely right, Donna. What happens is if you bring in other disciplines, because people always sort of say that it's not just the magic, you need to have the choreography with the dance, even the way that magicians move, as I say, but also then you've got the fantastic music of Michael Jackson, fantastic. You've got the fantastic set designs which your husband did and all that sort of stuff. You take all of those, that's where the magic is created, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. It's all together. And the show was only an hour long.
Right.
Don't forget, you know, so it was just, we packed it in quite a lot. I mean, it was such a time. I remember Cheetah Rivera used to come around and hang out because she was going out with one of the stagehands, Bobby.
Right.
And it was just fun. You know, we had all these amazing acrobats from Eastern Europe who had gone to Vegas looking for work. And so, you know, they got to be in the show and they were really happy doing that. And of course, beautiful girls. And you know, when you are dancing in Las Vegas, you're happy to get to dance, if you know what I mean. So sometimes it's a lot of parading around in a tall headdress, and you know, you can't really move much in a tall headdress except for your eyeballs and your hip bones.
I find such a problem, you know, it's awful. Headdress. Now, the other thing that's happening this week, and it's been a big week in the magic world, the highs and the lows with the loss of Siegfried and also, as I say, Gerry Cottle. But one of the highs is that we're celebrating 100 years since when P.T. Selbit first sawed a lady in half. And on the 17th of January, so it will be 100 years when it took place at the Finsbury Park Empire, the very first time that happened. And magicians around the world, all through the magic circle, are going to be celebrating this. We've been all over the news, as you might have seen, talking about it. And we're going to open the doors, if you like, to the virtual world of the magic circle on the 17th, on the anniversary, and talk about sawing in half. Now, you mentioned that in the show. Have you ever been sawed in half?
Not personally, not lately. Not physically, anyway.
He came, he sawed, he conquered. That's all we should say. It is
I lost my plug on that one. That was a good one, Andrew.
I know. It's going to be good. Well, it's a great illusion, isn't it? And the elements then that make great illusions, because that's what you're doing with your choreography as well. You're all in enhancing that sort of stuff. What would you say? Why do you think things such as the sawing in half last in the memories for so long with people?
I don't know. It's just nice to have the imagination suspended and have your belief system questioned. And I think it makes you feel like things can happen. There's a lot going on now, I think, in the supernatural world. I've been listening to Radio 3 a lot lately, and there's a lot of writers writing about supernatural things, and because we're in the pandemic too, I think people are just kind of more tuned in. We're not so busy going outwards. We're sort of stopping and being quiet and reflective, and you know, things come to people more at that time. You know, you kind of have a minute to sort of let your imagination go, perhaps, and to think about things and to write and reflect and maybe let spirits come through. You know, there was a woman talking about Edinburgh and all the old buildings there, and how she's written stories about, you know, the ghosts in the buildings. And we like magic, you know, it's like kids, it's like little kids, you know, they're connected to the moon. You know, I have a little granddaughter, she's like, I know the moon, you know, it's like they're connected to spiritual things. And you know, it's only in the Middle Ages that we get a little bit too stoic, I think. When you're very young and you're very old, I sometimes think that you are more connected to these elements. And so maybe in the middle, when we're trying to do the right thing and get on with it, we need to be reminded. We like to be reminded because it gives us a little vacation in a way, and it just opens up possibilities. You know, if you imagine big, more things can happen, can't they? You know.
Oh, absolutely. And a little bit of magic, everybody, as well. Well, today is in fact National Hat Day, so in honor of not only Gerry Cottle and Siegfried and Roy and P.T. Selbit for inventing the sawing in half, we should take off our top hats to all of them and celebrate, and absolutely, as you say, have a bit of touch of magic in our life. Donna, it has been an absolute joy catching up with you. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
I'll see you later, Andrew. Nice to meet you at last.
Absolutely. You take care. Bye-bye. So there we go. Donna King joining me to remember Siegfried from Siegfried and Roy, who sadly passed away this week. But as I say, celebrations as well, because 100 years since when P.T. Selbit invented or first performed the soaring in half. Pop along to the Magic Circle on the 17th of January. Have a look online. I'll put the links into that as well, and you'll be able to see the celebration of magicians around the world. But for me, Andrew Eborn, thank you very much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.